Sukhoi Su-27, flanker for NATO. Hi, welcome to the channel. It's my great pleasure to meet you. Today we're going to talk about the full history of Sukhoi Su-27, one of the most capable and popular fighter jets in the world. Let's get started. Early 1970s, the Soviet Union was in deep shit. They had this newfound enemy called the McDonnell Douglas F-15 Eagle, and this thing was just too much to handle for the existing MiG-21 and MiG-23 aircraft that the Soviets had at the time. They were inferior in all aspects: speed, agility, range, payload. Basically, it was like a new generation of aircraft against the old one, so they had to do something about it. Now, before we jump into the development of the Su-27, let me introduce myself. I'm not a pilot, not a mechanic, just an average guy who is passionate about aviation and has been for many years now. I've got lots of books on aviation. I've done research, watched videos, spoke to pilots. That's how I know what I know. Now, if you think that this intro is boring, wait until you hear about the start of this aircraft development. It's even worse. Back to the story. The Soviet Air Force wanted a new aircraft that would have a clear advantage over the new American F-15. This aircraft had to be maneuverable, quick, carry lots of weapons, and be reliable. Sounds easy, but they also had some pretty weird requirements as well. It had to have 2 engines, had to have a large sweep wing with high aspect ratio, and of course it had to be supersonic without afterburners. Why? Well, they already had the MiG-23 and MiG-25 aircraft that fit these requirements. But there was one problem. They weren't reliable enough. See, for the MiG-23 there were over 600 produced, but the engine problems were so bad that only 150 of them were actually used operationally. As for the MiG-25, reliability was better, but the maintenance was extremely hard and time-consuming. So the requirements were set, and the competition began. It was between 2 main competitors: Sukhoi Design Bureau with their prototype T-4 and the Mikoyan Bureau with their T-6. Now, when you hear about Sukhoi, you will definitely hear about this plane, the Su-27. But the Sukhoi Design Bureau was already quite famous because of their previous work on the Su-7 and Su-15, both capable interceptor aircraft. Even though the Su-7 wasn't an air superiority fighter, it was designed to engage enemy bombers and other slower-moving targets. In fact, it was the first operational aircraft with thrust vectoring capabilities. Thrust vectoring, by the way, is the ability to change the direction of the jet exhaust in order to improve the handling and maneuverability of the aircraft. The Su-15 was the first ever mass-produced supersonic fighter, which means that back in the 1960s, the Sukhoi Design Bureau already had a lot of experience designing high-performance fighter aircraft. As for the Mikoyan Bureau, they were already famous for their MiG series of aircraft. They had produced the MiG-21, which was the most widely used fighter in the world, as well as the MiG-23. So as you can imagine, the competition was fierce. And since I don't want to spend another 20 minutes talking about this, let's just jump straight into the development. And here's where things get interesting. We often think of aircraft development process as a linear and fast process, but that's far from the truth. The development of the Su-27 took more than 12 years and involved over 200 different prototypes. That's how serious and complicated the process really is. The first prototype of the Su-27 flew on May 1977, and the first thing that people noticed was the large wing and the unusual geometry of the fuselage. The second prototype that flew in 1980 was powered by 2 AL-21F engines, which were more powerful than the original ones. Further developments led to the creation of the Su-27 UBK, which was a double delta wing configuration, meaning that each wing had variable sweep leading edge and constant sweep trailing edge. Why did they do this? Because the leading edge of the wings were swept back at 65 degrees and the trailing edge at 72 degrees, gave the plane an incredibly high lift coefficient, and made it very agile and maneuverable. Also, the double delta wing configuration helped the aircraft to reduce wave drag during supersonic flight. All these features combined made the Su-27 incredibly versatile and allowed it to perform aerobatics that were previously thought to be impossible. In fact, it could perform an incredible maneuver called the Cobra, which involved flying at low altitude and then suddenly pulling up to 9 grams, while keeping the nose pointed down. The F-15, on the other hand, would simply stall and crash if it tried to do the same. But despite its incredible flight characteristics, the Su-27 had some serious drawbacks. The radar, for example, was not very good, and the electronics were outdated. This is probably because the Soviet Union had placed all their hopes on the new T-4 bomber aircraft, which was supposed to have the best radar and avionics of its time. Fortunately, the program was canceled due to various reasons, including the lack of funding and the Chernobyl disaster. And this meant that the Su-27 had to make do with what it could get, which wasn't much. So they installed the same radar that was on the MiG-29, which was known to be unreliable. It's not a very good solution, but it had to be done. But eventually the plane was accepted into service in 1981 under the name Su-27UBK. By the way, the letter U stands for unofficial designation, and B stands for black. The full name would be Su-27 Black. I don't know why they didn't just call it the Su-27, but hey, we're not here to judge. The initial reaction to the new aircraft was mixed. Some pilots loved it because of its incredible aerobatic capabilities, while others hated it because of its poor radar and visibility. But the overall consensus was that it was a definite improvement over the existing MiG-23 and MiG-29 aircraft. So, the Soviets started to produce it in large numbers, and by 1991, they had produced over 900 of them. But then the Soviet Union collapsed, and everything went to shit. Literally. Russia found itself with a huge stockpile of advanced fighter aircraft that nobody was buying. So they started to export it to various countries such as Ukraine, Belarus, Kazakhstan, and a few others. But this was still not enough to keep the factories running, so they started to look for foreign buyers. In the meantime, India was looking for a new fighter aircraft to replace its aging fleet of MiG-21s, and the choice was between the Su-27 and the F-16. Eventually, they chose the Su-27 and became the first major operator outside the former Soviet Union. This deal saved the Sukhoi Design Bureau and the Russian aviation industry as a whole. And as a result, they started to export the Su-27 to other countries such as China, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Egypt. In 1996, a new variant of the Su-27 was developed specifically for export customers. It was called the Su-30, and it had a more powerful engine, improved aerodynamics, and better avionics. This aircraft was a real game changer, and it quickly became the most widely exported Russian fighter aircraft. In fact, over 90% of all Su-27s that were produced were actually Su-30 variants. So now we have the situation where Russia doesn't use the Su-27 anymore, because it's old and outdated. And all the other countries that operate it are using the Su-30. Go figure. Anyway, there are currently 16 countries that operate the Su-27 or Su-30 aircraft, making it one of the most widely operated fighter aircraft in the world. As for the cost of the aircraft, it's not really known because it's a military aircraft and nobody really knows. However, we do know that the Su-27 was estimated to cost around $20 million in 1987. That's all I have for today. If you liked the video, leave a comment below. See you later.